I hope you're having a fantastic time at the Swell Summit. Our next session lead is Jeff Yalden. Jeff Yalden is highly regarded as the #1 teen mental health speaker in all of North America. Jeff is a suicide crisis intervention expert and suicide prevention trainer working with hundreds of school communities every year. He's an Amazon 4-time best-selling author of the books Boom, One Word to Instantly Inspire Action, Deliver Rewards, and Positively Affect Your Life Every Day, and also of Teen Suicide, the why behind today's suicide epidemic. Since 1992, Jeff Yalden has traveled to 50 states and 49 countries, delivering his messages about life, mental health, and living your best life every day. From 2005 to 2011, Jeff was a celebrity teen and family life coach on MTV's Emmy Award-winning hit reality show, Made. As a celebrity teen and family life coach, Jeff gets the heart of the matter, helping teens, young adults, families, and school communities. Every year, over 1 million people are left inspired by Jeff Yalden's inexhaustible energy that permeates after he speaks. Without further ado, I present It's Okay to Feel the Way You Feel with Jeff Yalden.
SWL conference to the young people, to the adults, teachers, distinguished guests. Hey, thank you for joining me. I'm Jeff Yalden, and I want to share with you just a little bit about mental health and motivation. Another term that I like to use, mental hydration. I don't like dealing with the stigma of mental health because I think your mental health is the same as your physical health. And you take care of yourself physically, I think you also have to take care of yourself mentally. I am a man that proudly lives with, I'm diagnosed with major depression, bipolar type 2, and post-traumatic stress disorder. And I say proudly because when I got diagnosed, it was one of the best moments of my life because I started to look back and I started to realize that, well, it wasn't my parents that did this or my friends that did this or teachers did this. I just stopped blaming things on other people. And there came a time when I looked in the mirror and I said, maybe I'm part of the problem. So that was when I went on this journey where I acknowledged that I was part of the problem. I accepted that I'm a man that lives with mental illness. And I made the decision that I wasn't going to let this define me, that if I did the work, I can live a normal life. And that's what I want to encourage you. Not that you might be living with mental illness, but mental illness today is very different than it was 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. And when you look at the pandemic that we're dealing with, you look at the stress, the anxiety, people are overwhelmed. I think also with social media, we have a term that we call social media depression. A lot of that comes from the dopamine effect, and I'm going to get more into that. So even if you might be feeling more stress than normal and you don't know how to deal with this, or this is an uncomfortable feeling, maybe your anxiety is high. Maybe you're feeling alone. You're feeling like you're a burden to people or you're a disappointment. What I want you to recognize right now are these are red flags that you shouldn't take lightly, that you might want to address it and ask questions. The other thing that I found is my vulnerability has become my strength. I'm not ashamed of it. I love talking about it. And the more I talk about it, the better I feel and the more I feel like I'm doing a service to other people. I have never had someone say that I'm any less of a man because I'm in therapy or I'm any less of a man because I take medication. So I'm trying to encourage you to do the work that I have learned to do every day. And one of that is I knew therapy was something I had to go through. Being on medication is something that is a priority every day. But more importantly than anything, I think, is my constant need to focus on my self-care, putting myself first. And that's not selfish. That is a priority. And it's something that I have to do every day so that I am more in control and I don't let my emotions control me. Also, for those of you that are watching this and you think, well, I don't live with mental illness, that's great. But you can still benefit because I promise you, you have friends that are feeling stress and anxiety. They're overwhelmed. And I want you to be able to help them. So if you know something, do something. If you hear something, say something. Don't think that you're going against your friend, because when they're speaking out, they're often asking for help, but they might not know how. So let's get right into the depth of this. This slide right here is my theory on teen suicide. So I know I just went from mental health to suicide. Hold on a second. I want to kind of share with you how all of this happens. Dealing with mental health or mental illness, it could be like seasonal depression. I'm not saying it's clinical depression. Again, I'm talking about the surface where your anxiety, your stress. The problem is when you don't address this day after day, week after week, month after month, it continues to build and it continues to manifest. And all of a sudden, if you're not speaking it out, you will start to act it out. And so here's what I want to show you. Many young people start to have this feeling of, I'm alone, which represents a belief on the part of the individual that he or she doesn't have any meaningful relationships. Now, the pandemic, social isolation, the more time on our devices and smartphones and social media, social isolation. Isolation is toxic. And although I think social media technology is incredible today, if you don't know how to use it with balance and boundaries, it can start to overwhelm you and you become addicted. That's the dopamine effect that's within these devices that basically is this chemical that says, I want more, I want more, I want more. And as we see with adults, they're dealing with addiction. Well, adults is like, okay, you know better. But we can't say to teenagers who don't really understand, well, you know better. We have to teach them. And I will tell you this, if you spend more than 4 or 5 hours a day on your devices, you're 70% more likely to have major depression in your life. More concerning is simply this. In the next decade, you will see a 31% increase in suicide, drug and alcohol related deaths. So if you start to feel alone, which you don't think you have these meaningful relationships, or you're tired of these relationships that are coming through the devices, but you don't feel like you're making that connection, like heart to heart, that's a red flag. And so my question to you is, okay, so what do you need to do to change that? And you have to figure that out. One thing, you're aware and you're asking the question, now do something about it. Now, the other part of this is, I'm a burden or I'm a disappointment. And so you might feel like you're a disappointment to yourself, your friends, your parents, coaches, teachers. This represents a belief on the part of the individual that he or she is not making any notable contribution to the world. And you start to think that you serve as a liability. I mean, think about it. You're on your devices, isolation. You're not doing anything, isolation. You're constantly looking forward to go home, sitting in isolation, being on the device, and you start to feel like you're not making a contribution. The other thing, when I meet young people that might be in this state of sadness or depression or feeling of alone, the disappointment, the burden, I often ask them this. Well, have you spoken to your parents, or do you have a trusted adult? And a lot of times they say, no. And I say, why? Well, because they have their problems, and I don't want them to have to worry about me because they have to worry about their own problems. So if they have to worry about mine, then they got to worry about mine too. And I don't want to do that to them. Listen, as a teenager, you should not have to worry about your parents or trusted adults in your life and what they might be going through. This is your life. And you have people that love you, and we can't help you if we don't know. So I want you to feel comfortable that if these red flags exist, definitely speak out. And so you notice these two circles: I'm alone, I'm a burden. In the middle, you'll see where the three circles come together, where I have like that web in there. That right there concerns me deeply. Because if I'm alone and I'm a burden and those feelings manifest for too long, then you start to think about controlling the pain and taking the matters into your own mind, into your own thought, into your own, well, I can fix this. And you start going down this unhealthy, unsafe route of self-harm. And that's really a cry for help. It could possibly be a suicide attempt. And I want you to understand this too. So self-harm isn't just, cutting or pulling your hair. It could be scratching. It could be self-medicating. It could be reckless behavior. And years ago, we knew more about self-harm with girls. And then all of a sudden, maybe in the past 10 years, it started to even out girls and boys. Well, today, actually, self-harm is more prevalent in boys than it is girls, which is interesting as I share this with you. And I want you to try and understand this. Girls are 2 times more likely to think about wanting to make a forever decision and end their lives. But boys are 4 times more likely than girls to complete the act. Now, I'm going to talk about this for a second. This is self-harm. I don't mean for this to be a trigger for anybody, but I think it's important that you be aware. And this is a conversation we need to start having more. Typically, for a female, a young lady, to make that forever decision, they think about strangulation or they think about overdosing. Boys, on the other hand, young men, think about a firearm. So what's interesting here, as boys are 4 times more likely, but girls 2 times more likely to think about it, boys complete it. Watch this. As girls think about strangulation or overdosing, there's a thought process that goes with this, like, okay, well, how am I going to do it? Where am I going to do it? Who's going to find me? What time? Who's going to be home? Where boys, on the other hand, with a firearm, oftentimes it's an emotional reaction to something. There's no thought process. It's, I'm angry, I'm reacting, I'm pulling a trigger. What I'm trying to say here is whenever you have these emotions, and no matter how strong they are, we have to put time between the thought and the action. And when you can just reach out or you can intervene with someone, the time reduces the anxiety. So if you're thinking to yourself, well, Jeff, I'm not qualified to save my friend's life, you are more qualified than you think you are. Because if you can intervene in conversation or say, hey, I care about you. Let's breathe. Let's go for a walk. Let's take a time out. Let's journal. Let's color. Let's go to the beach. If you can put time to bring down the emotion, but I'm also going to say, don't take matters into your own hands. Do the responsible thing and reach out to a trusted adult. Ask the question, persuade the individual that help is the right thing, and then do something. Now you have the desire manifesting over time. We're not getting help. We have a desire to want to end our lives. That represents habituation to physiological pain and fearsome experiences, to repeated exposure to painful and provocative events. That's why I want you to cut the cycle so that it doesn't repeat itself day after day after day, week after week, month after month. Cut it and break the cycle. Talk to someone. I don't think people want to die. I think what it is they want the pain to end, but we're living in a world where we think if we can't accomplish it now, we can't reach our goals now. What do you mean I have to wait? Listen, be patient in the process. Take time to think. Breathe. Another slide I want to share with you is simply this. We have situations, good, bad, but from a situation comes your thoughts. And your thoughts often come from how you perceive the situation. Relax. We don't know a lot about the situation, so let's not come to this conclusion yet. So then thoughts dictate your feelings. Feelings dictate your behavior. So again, the situation arises, you have thoughts, and those thoughts trigger your feelings. And based on those feelings, you engage in certain behaviors, which in turn impact the situation, both positively and negative. And this whole cycle just keeps circling around. And this is something that is called behavioral activation. Break the cycle, get unstuck, because inactivity keeps you unmotivated. So I want to share with you this here. Behavioral activation is where isolation, inactivity, it leads to depression. But you keep doing the same thing. You're not asking for help. You're not addressing red flags. So it goes back to inactivity. The more time in our devices, the more alone we feel. We spend more time. We start to feel depressed. Now, again, alone, disappointment, sad, overwhelmed, break the cycle. Don't do that. Do this. Motion changes emotion. So get up and do more of what matters to you. And that becomes self-reinforcing. As you start to feel better about yourself, you continue doing more of what makes you happy. If it makes you happy, you feel better. So again, I'm not necessarily talking about clinical depression. If those red flags are there and a therapist or doctor suspects that this is more serious, therapy, medication, and I'm very, very, very pro-therapy. I'm pro-medication. If you were to ask me what's more important, I think therapy, because therapy gives you tools. You can work through things where medication is like a Band-Aid, but I think it's equally important. I do yoga too. So for me, my self-care, yoga, therapy, and being on medication, self-care, change the cycle, get up, motion changes emotion. And for students, I want to talk about self-care, exercise, set goals, change your nutrition, more protein, less carbs, less sugar, more water, sleep. I think young people need 8 hours of uninterrupted sleep a night. And if you're ugly, you need more. Now, I'm not saying you're ugly, but I'm saying maybe you have an ugly attitude from lack of sleep. Another self-care, it's important because it helps you to manage stress. Get involved, get off your devices, get more involved with things that are important in life. I also want to throw this in for adults. I think it's very similar. Sleep, exercise, nutrition, manage that stress, positive self-talk, journaling, spirituality, have a support system, accountability buddy, set goals, have healthy boundaries. I'll tell you one of the best things for me, learn to say no. And then I want to talk about social media. As great as social media is, remember, people post the best of the best. So don't get caught up in comparing your lives to that of what you see. When people don't post the bad, they want everyone to see this glamorous life. So be careful with social media. And when you start to see this affecting you, hey, take a time out. You don't have to post everything. I think, listen, if you're posting, it's positive, it's supportive, it's encouraging, and it's helpful to other people, motivational. That's what we use social media for. So I want to end with this. Are there any simple questions that you might have that I can answer? And at this point, I'm going to stop sharing and have a little conversation with you ladies. Are you there? Let's unmute everybody. All right, all right. Hello. Okay. So Amrutha and Leia definitely join in with us as two young ladies that are running the SWL conference. Tell me about what I just said. And I went through it because I know we wanted to keep it around 20 minutes. Do you have any general questions or thoughts?
I was just wondering, what do you think, like for you, like how do you manage your stress properly? You know?
That's a great question. Managing my stress is something that it's every day, because as I'm talking to you about this, I live with this too. So there's one thing I do. Most stress comes from being overwhelmed, I think. So I'm very organized. I use Google Keep. So everything that happens, I'm writing in Google Keep in just an everything folder. I also use Asana and Evernote as two apps. So I write everything down. My thought is if something takes 3 minutes or less, I take care of it right away. Otherwise, in the morning and at night, I go through all of my Google Keep and I put it in the departments that it needs to be. Like, here's a priority tomorrow. This can wait till Wednesday. It's like my to-do list, and I just attack it every single day. And what doesn't get accomplished, it just moves to the next day. Sometimes you're delegating, sometimes you just have to say no. The bottom line is simply this: I have stress like you do. I think stress can be healthy. I also think it can be unhealthy if you're not managing it and coping with it in a good way. Your self-care, very important. Your nutrition, I think, is very important. Your exercise is very important. Do we have enough time in the day? Probably not. You might have to get up earlier, or how about this? Put your social media and your devices away. Because I think for most people that are probably watching this, we might think, Mom, Dad, I was only on it for like 15 minutes, when really it was probably an hour and a half. So have boundaries with your devices. For me, when I'm working, sometimes my device is in the other room because I'm focused on doing something on the computer that I have to focus with. So managing stress it's a challenge, but it's like a muscle. Work at it every day. Don't avoid it. Wonderful question.
I also had a question about like if you see someone else struggling, how do you approach, talking to them or having a conversation with them? Or if you yourself are struggling, like where do you start, I guess is the question.
I love you. I that is a question I get so often, and I so appreciate it because it says to me that young people are like, we're wanting to talk, but like we don't know how or where to start. Listen, just start talking. I don't think we need to, like people say, you shouldn't talk about money, you shouldn't talk about politics. Be objective. I don't judge one person or another by who they voted for president. I want to know who you voted because I might say, well, why? And you might share with me, I'm learning more. Be objective. And so if I want to answer that in two parts. If you know someone that is showing red flags that might not be acting normal, or you're just like, wow, something just doesn't seem right. Do it in a very tactful, graceful manner where you might pull them aside and just, here's a great question, Laya. Oftentimes we say to our friends, like let's say our boyfriend or girlfriend may have broken up with one of our friends or something, and we might say, hey, how you doing? I'm fine. What does that mean? It means like, I'm fine, leave me alone, I don't want to talk about it. Here's a question I've learned to ask. Hey, how's your heart? I know you and so broke up, and I just wanted to see how your heart is. Because when you ask a question like that, to them, they can't really say fine. And to them, you're answering the two questions that people want to know. Can I trust you? And do you care about me? Now, for you, if you start feeling just edgy or anxious or reactionary or alone, depressed, and this is uncomfortable, don't keep it to yourself. You have a trusted adult, and the number one most trusted adult in a child's life should be a parent. Most likely that same-sex parent. Now, I know a lot of people, no, Jeff, you don't understand. I do understand. But do not tell me that you don't have trusted adults in your life. Teacher, coach, your friends' parents. It's okay to not be okay, but it's not okay to not be okay and to not do something about it. So I'm counting on you ladies for taking on this big challenge. I'm counting on you to help other people say, hey, it's okay to talk, but be non-judgmental. Don't try and fix their problems. Validate their thoughts and their feelings, and learn to listen and say, I care. Great question, man. Great question. Anything else?
This is more of a specific question, but you know how for some people, stress can propel them to do something about it, whereas for other people, it can like make them freeze. Is
Yeah.
that like what do you think about that?
Well, I think stress can make you react. I think stress can make you freeze. I think it's fight or flight. The bottom line is when the stress gets too overwhelming, we've let it get too far. When it gets too overwhelming and somebody intervenes, listen, breathe, take a time out. I think before you let it get to that point, you should learn to take a time out. I'll tell you something I think is really incredible: meditation. And you might think, oh, this guy's really a like spiritual weirdo. No, sometimes meditation for me is just sitting in this place at this time. I want pizza. And what I like about that is my mind just went to pizza, acknowledge it, and just bring it back. And sometimes I just sit there for a minute, maybe 3 minutes, 10 minutes. Rarely do I go 10 minutes without going crazy. And I just want you to sit there, maybe have a mantra. Inhale peace. Exhale love. And you kind of migrate that with your breath. Inhale for a count of 4 through your nose. Exhale through your nose. Inhale peace. Exhale love. Bring the emotions down. Too often on a scale of 1 to 10, we're living at like a 5 or a 7. We're overwhelmed. And when you're so overwhelmed, you're not really present. I want you to try and live every day at a 2 or 4 so that if something becomes stressful, you might go to a 4 or 5. You're not going to react. You're in control. Learn to take time outs. Learn to do what makes you feel better. Because as our responsibilities become greater, our obligations become bigger, more stress gets piled on. Wonderful question. Hey, the bottom line is this. Don't be afraid to talk about how you're feeling, because you're going to come to find out you're not alone. But by you being willing to talk about it, people are actually going to admire you because you're talking about what they're feeling. And they're going to find out, maybe I'm not alone in this. This is real. It's real. So great questions. Anything else? You know, as we get ready to wrap up, I really want to say this to the audience and to you. We're all responsible to one another. We're all responsible to the mental well-being of our inner circle. Again, don't be judgmental. Don't try and fix or tell someone how they should feel. Listen, support one another. It's okay to feel sad if you lost a game. It's okay to feel hurt if your girlfriend or boyfriend dumped you or you were rejected by the school. Feelings are feelings, and they're meant to be shared. Now, thoughts are just thoughts. Like an arm is an arm, a leg is a leg. Thoughts are what they are. They're thoughts. But feelings, don't hold them in. It's okay to speak. It's okay to share. It's okay to feel with each other. So keep the conversation going little by little. You're going to start seeing these red flags and say, this isn't right. I need to do something. So I thank you so much for letting me be a part of this.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, ladies. You're doing a great job.